Hey ladies and gentlemen, Casual Crono here. About a month ago, I posted on my YouTube channel a request for you all. I said, hey, what videos do you want me to focus on? And I loved the feedback. Thank you very much for posting and giving your suggestions. There were so many suggestions. I know, because YouTubing is not my full-time job. There's no way I will be able to answer and make videos for all of the requests, but I am going to continue on my character development videos, my Super Boss teams, my Should You Awakens. Several people mentioned those, and I'm off for winter break, so I thought I'd review some of the requests and just see what I can get done for right now. And I have Mountain Dew here. That's not product placement. I just love Mountain Dew, so please don't blow the speakers. There we go. And it is Sunday afternoon, and I am good with responsibilities, so I have some time basically to look over this and work on some videos. And one of the first responses that I got, I'd like to see, this is from Nicholas, I'd like to see a list and review of your favorite non-Stellar Awakened characters. And I told him it would definitely start with Melody AS. Well, that's a lie. I alphabetized them, so Melody AS is going to be 5th, not 1st. But that said, it's I thought about the request, and that could be taken several ways. So I thought I would at least talk about the non-Stellar Awakened characters that I have used in the past. And I picked out 12. Ignore the title up here. That was the group that had my Lunaria testing and all of that. So we're just going to go alphabetically. I'm not going to do demonstrations for each one. I think that would take too long. And also realize I'm not saying necessarily that these 12 are the absolute best, no matter what, non-Stellar Awakened characters. As always, it really depends on what support system you have for them. So I'm just going to kind of go through each one. I'm at the Nagsham test dummy to do one or two examples really quick. But let's just go ahead and get started. The first non-Stellar Awakened character that I feel is very important in the game is the free character Aisha. You can get her simply by getting to past, I think, chapter 13. I'm not sure if you can get her if you're on chapter 13, but after chapter 13, I think there's like a little quest or something in Parsifal Palace in Antiquity, and you just go there and you accept the quest, and she joins the party as a guest. And the whole guest concept always seemed really weird to me because it's not like she ever leaves. You have full access to all of her skills and everything. So having her as a guest, the only thing it doesn't do is when you look at your board, it does not contribute to your maximum number of characters. Once you finish the quest and they're no longer tagged as a guest, then they add to the count. That's the only thing. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Aisha is wonderful for two reasons. Very early on, you have a character that can deploy 2 zones. Now, I know that with all the free characters, the symphonies and everything, zones today are a lot easier to access. At least when I was playing I'm not sure if I was day 1 or week 1 or what, but I'm a long time player. There was a time where zones were like, oh my gosh, I will do anything just to get one character with a zone, any zone, I don't care, and I'll build around that zone. So zones were a lot rarer way back in the day, and here comes this character that's free and has 2 zones, fire and water. Now between the two, when I was using her, and if you look back at my Super Boss team videos, if you go back to some of the earliest ones, she was a staple on my fire team. She would deploy Fire Zone, improve fire type attack for all party members for a whopping 5 turns. I could cast it and not worry about it again because the fire stance would go away long before the buff would. So I'd have to redeploy the fire stance anyway, so it was kind of like a permanent 50% attack boost for the team the entire fight. And then while you were in fire zone, you could reduce fire resistance, provide a regen for your party, and improve the party's power, intellect, and speed for 5 turns when you cast Eternal Fantasia, and of course attacked in the process. So she deployed a zone, she buffed, she debuffed, and she healed. I mean, what's not to love? So Aisha, very important character if you're a newer character, if you're a newer player, kind of just starting out, and you've passed up chapter 13, go run back and grab her. Aldo's a fire user. She's a fire zone deployer and buffer and debuffer. The two of them make a very easy pairing, I guess, early on in the game. Throw in a free character like Particio as your fire tank, and you really do have like the foundations for a fire team very accessible very early on. So even though she's not Stellar Awakened, I would say that Aisha, at least for early and mid-game playing, can be very valuable. Next up is Elseal. I kind of debated tossing her in or not, but so you all know me as Casual Crono. I've mentioned in the past that I do have a long gaming history. When I played World of Warcraft, I was a raid leader, I was a guild leader. I wasn't always casual. Many games I will spend hours, weeks, months on like perfecting. And I still kind of do. I mean, look at this channel. I'm destroying almost all of the super bosses in the game. I want to complete all the stories and everything. It's still there. I'm just kind of keeping it more laid back and relaxed. And part of my playstyle is I like characters that allow that relaxed playstyle. I just kind of put them in the team. They do something usually automatically, and I'm happy. And Elseal is one of those, primarily with her Glace Misericord, and I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that right. I've probably been mispronouncing it for the past month. It creates an exposed effect for water. This wasn't quite as important until Verdanta came along, and Verdanta really requires to be hitting weaknesses in order to be effective. And Glace Misericord, basically, if you have a whole water team, on the 4th turn, you cast this, and the enemy is permanently exposed the entire rest of the fight. That's awesome. If the exposure somehow does get cleared, you just cast Glace Misericord again, and it comes back. I've tested that. I wasn't sure if it was just a one-time exposure or not, but no. Once the enemy has 4 stacks of intel, which do not go away when you cast Glace Misericord, basically every time from that point forward you cast it, as long as those 4 stacks haven't gone away, they're exposed. So that's kind of like a brain-dead, simple version of exposure. Most exposed type effects, most exposures, we'll take Nikoko for example, most characters when they create an exposure, for example Nikoko, Nekomata, Observance, it lasts for like 1 turn, which is kind of sort of 2 turns, because when you cast it, it's immediately exposure, and then it lasts the turn after you cast it. 1 to 2 turns at most, and then you have to cast this again. So I don't want to be casting the same skill every other turn. I just want to set it and forget it, and Elseal allows for that to happen. So that is why I like Elseal a lot. Normal style, there is no Stellar Awakening. Flammelapis, oldie but goodie. Love Flammelapis. It also helps that I'm married to redheads, and she's a redhead. But Flammelapis is a character that I got early on. I was actually, I don't want to say I was close to quitting the game, but after I got to like, I don't know, it was definitely in the east somewhere, when the difficulty ramped up and I was having trouble just fighting through trash mobs. The game got less and less interesting to me. I really wasn't enjoying it that much. I would just log in, collect my daily stones, and log out. And I did that for a period of months. Probably why I'm not quite as far along as some of the other day one players, but whatever. By sheer luck, I got both Flammelapis and Tsubame AS. And Flammelapis, if you are unfamiliar with her, for the first 3 turns, she attacks all enemies and it costs no mana. It's a guaranteed critical, and the fewer the turns, the stronger it is. So like turn 1, it's the strongest it's going to be. Then it gets a little bit weaker, then on turn 4, you can't use it. She has just basic Grasta equipped, like some power currents and a bullseye and stuff. See, and the others are not doing anything. So right there, she did 20,000, 40,000 per enemy. Now, by today's standards, that's not super large. So you can see it's getting a little bit weaker. But when you're in like chapter 50 and 60, the enemies don't have ridiculous amounts of health. So I could just walk around with her and Tsubame AS and one-shot all the trash mobs every turn. And it being preemptive, they would always attack before the enemies. The reason I have her in the list and not Tsubame is that she also has something called Neptune. And it is a very powerful attack. It attacks all enemies. It's a guaranteed crit. So here is Neptune. Look at that, over 1 million in damage per enemy. When I was tackling chapters 50, 60, 70, 80, that damage was usually enough to take out a lot of bosses. Let's go ahead and finish this up. Can I run away from the bag baddie? Probably not. Nope. Okay. So Flammelapis doubled as trash clearer and boss killer. As long as the boss... That was a decent amount of damage, considering. Assuming that the bosses weren't immune to water, Flammelapis pretty much carried me into the Hollow. The chapter, what was it, 92 and up? Whenever the Hollow stuff started. And even then, she was able to handle the first few areas of the Hollow before it started getting really tough. But geared with things like Miyake's staff, guidance ring, just some amount of intellect, some power of currents, later a bullseye ore when it came along. She was a pretty good damage dealer, trash clearer, boss killer. She was MVP for a lot of fights. So, and she doesn't have a Stellar Awakening. So I would include her in my list of 12 characters that are not Stellar Awakened, but are important for some reason or another. So let's heal back up and talk about the next one. Whom you saw in action. Pretty much anyone that's been playing the game for a long period of time will tell you, if you get a chance to, get Iphi. Iphi is so good for so many reasons. Again, that casual playstyle that I enjoy, where you just throw a character in a team and forget about it, she has blood contracts. At the start of the fight, she gives a blood contract to everyone in the party. That improves their damage and everything, and gives me some freedom to do some types of attacks. You saw that she sacrificed a few characters during that test dummy fight. When I was featuring Flammelapis, she can sacrifice characters, give them barrier piercing right afterwards. And it's not like it's a one-turn sacrifice. If I go down to this. So blood contract gives basically risk taker to all characters. Attacks that would hit all allies hit the character with the blood contract, and it's the person to the farthest right. So if you put a tank on the far right and you have Iphi in the team, attacks that hit all allies will go and be redirected to the tank. So that's how I managed a lot of fights in the early days. And if all 3 characters eventually lose their blood contracts, just deploy Shade Zone once, or attempt to deploy it, and they all get their blood contracts back. So you can manipulate and stretch out a fight for a long period of time that way. So the fact that she can kind of sort of prevent death and kind of sort of revive while improving damage and allowing things like barrier piercing stuff, that alone is pretty awesome. But she has more. She can inflict pain and poison, and it's persistent, it ignores resistance. So she was a very early pain setter for me. And not only does she set pain, she reduces the incoming damage. She reduces enemies' power, intellect, and speed, and type resistance. And then, if that's not enough, she can also buff up the party. She can do an increase in power, intellect, and speed, and have knockback immunity once. And she can even strengthen that based on how many seances. Every time she does a sacrifice, she gets a seance, and so that's how you get seances. But anyway, so she can manipulate death. She can apply pain, guaranteed. She can inflict, or she can debuff the enemy. She can buff the team, and she has a magic attack that ignores defenses and is a guaranteed critical. So it's not the most strongest magic attack in the world, but it is an attack that hits 3 times, and the defense, or magic defense in this case, is treated as 0 when it does the math for the damage calculations. So Iphi was one of the ones that I did back in the day, spin Luring Shadows, so I would have access to 4 skills at all times. She was a staple on my fire team as well for a very long time. If you look back at my Super Boss videos, she, along with Aisha, were 2 of the fire users, since she is actually a fire user. That's her only fire skill. And she's just incredibly helpful. She lets you cheese a lot of content, which I'm all about, taking shortcuts. Casual player, I'm not going to brute strength everything. And she was an anniversary character. All the other anniversary characters at this point, like Melissa, Eva, all of them, they have their Stellar Awakenings. So probably at some point, all of us are hoping she gets a Stellar Awakening, and we're also hoping that it's not horribly botched like Mariel's was. So I don't know how much longer Iphi will remain on this non-Stellar Awakened best characters list, but for now, she is not Stellar Awakened, and she is definitely one of the best characters in the game, even by today's standards. The next character we're going to talk about is Melody AS, her Medea style. It is probably one of the most helpful non-Stellar Awakened characters, or she is one of the most helpful non-Stellar, not it, but she's awesome. We'll just go with that. I mentioned that I like just to be able to throw a character in a team and forget about it. So here's Melody with a bunch of wind users. Punch. Who cares? Hit, hit. She places... You'll see that she just broke the zone. She redeploys an awakened wind zone, and you saw that heal that's there? That heal will stay there even if that zone disappears. It's an end of turn heal, and more importantly, here it is, it restores mana, MP. So if you have her and a character like Sesta, for example, Sesta requires an awakened wind zone to give herself divine wolf stacks. If you have Melody on the team, you will always have a wind zone, and you saw that she's able to destroy any other type of zone, including other awakened zones. So if the boss puts up an awakened Earth zone, for example, as long as Melody's on the team, at some point she will destroy the awakened Earth zone, place back a wind zone, heal the team, restore MP, and allow Sesta to do Sesta things.
These are the cries of the voiceless. How's this?
So if that's not enough for you, she can also put pain on all enemies. She reduces their power, intellect, and speed. She provides a 50% damage barrier to all party members. And the debuff is increased if you have all wind allies, which she's pretty much always with wind characters, or should be. So when she's in her demented state, that's when she kind of goes crazy and deploys the zone. I think it lasts for 3 turns. But when she's in demented, the entire party's damage improves, and it increases damage against weak points. That's just from one skill. She can also improve critical damage, wind-type attacks. She can reduce wind resistance, and she can improve critical rate. She is just a powerhouse. Let's go ahead and finish this up.
These are the cries of the voiceless.
Are we done? Oh, 1 turn left. Okay. Who cares? Let's finish this up.
Listen. These are the cries of the voiceless.
So at the start of the turn, Desire, that's the name of it. I kept thinking Demented. At the start of every turn, she stacks Desires equal to the number of frontline wind allies. So if she's paired with 3 wind allies and she herself is wind, she basically stacks 4 Desires. At the end of the turn, she consumes those 4 to enter Demented mode. When she enters Demented mode, she destroys the current zone, deploys the awakened wind zone. And then at the turn end, when demented, she restores party members' hit points and MP, which means it's not tied to the zone. If she deploys the awakened wind zone, and then the boss destroys it and deploys a different zone, she's still in demented state. She still heals the team for, I believe it's 3 turns is what she is her demented state. So they still get healed regardless of whether the wind zone stays. And as you saw, she had all those other skills as well. And she can do other things too. Restore MP, reduce physical resistance, stuff like that. These are just the ones that I tend to favor when I use her. And she is still, to this day, December 2025, this is my... Oh, not Claude. How did he get in there? That's probably... Oh, I was doing his weapon tempering. Let's go ahead and throw Tome in before I forget. Go fight something and go, where's my Avenger Grasta? Oh yeah, he's not wind. Tome, there you are. Okay. She is the only non-stellar awakened character in my wind team. And it's because I like to throw her in the team, sit back, and just let her deploy wind zones. And then Tsubame, because she's an alter character, they have all alter characters have something called Another Sense. It's like a little extra buff. In her case, when a zone is deployed, it extends it for 3 turns. So when Melody enters her demented state and deploys an awakened wind zone, Tsubame's in the team, it's awakened for 6 turns. So I really don't have to worry about it, and she heals, and she does pain, she restores MP. You know, she's awesome. There's really... I don't know how much more I can gush over her, but she and Iphi probably are the two most, I don't want to say powerful, but to me, the most important of the 12 SA characters I'm talking about. So if you have Sesta, or if you have a strong wind team, Melody will almost definitely make it stronger even now in 2025. The next character I want to talk about is Myunfa Alter. Myunfa Alter, she's a character that I really would love to get to 80 light points for the extra skill slot, but I mean, you can see even now I don't have enough to get her to 80 if I wanted to. I side graded her, so she had 0, and she's always had 0, unfortunately. But Myunfa Alter is an amazing support character. She has a prayer. So when she was released, we had a lot of singers. We didn't have that many people able to pray. And I think praying is far, far superior to singing, because you cast the prayer, it does its thing, and she can continue to do other skills. Singers, they're locked into singing until they get interrupted. So she starts praying. When she prays, power, intellect, speed goes up. To her, she gets a shield, 30% of her max HP, and I think the shield is capped at like 2,000 health. Does it say? It does not. So if you have her and you want to build her, you want to try and build her for HP if you want to make use of that shield. Anyway, in addition, while she's praying, so if the buffs aren't enough for you, allies' damage increases, but perhaps most importantly, any damage of 1,500 or less is reduced to 0. So if an enemy hits any character for like 1,200 damage, it's immediately dropped to 0. And fixed damage, by the way, I don't think is affected by this. I think a pain or a poison still does damage. But you have seen this. If you see me fighting the Worm King's shadow, I use Myunfa in that team, and while she's praying, his end breath attack does 0 damage across the board. And then if you start thinking about 1,500 or less, well, there's a lot of bosses out there that do like 2,000, 3,000 damage per hit. Well, you have a bunch of characters on your team. If they can reduce that amount of damage, like if you have Yuna and she stacks those burnaways, reducing the enemy's power and intellect, and then you have someone else that casts a skill and drops the enemy's power by like 30% or 50%, suddenly they're doing a lot less damage. And if you can get their damage below 1,500, then they do 0 damage. So that part of the praying alone is amazing to me. And if that's not all, she can apply pain and poison, and it ignores target resistance. She can deploy an Earth Zone, or if she's paired with staff allies, she can deploy a Magic Zone. And if that's not enough, she can improve physical resistance, type resistance, and do that 50% damage barrier for 3 times, and stacks caretaking. Based on the number of Earth allies, speed, endurance, and spirit, not percents, the actual numbers are increased. Which means you can buff someone up 100 points of endurance, 100 points of spirit, and make them a lot faster if they're part of a full Earth team. So the user does take double damage. But it applies that to the ally to the user's left. So if you have the tank in the party to the left of Myunfa, that tank could stand to gain up to 100 points of endurance and spirit. So does it really matter if they're taking extra damage at that point? Probably not, because then if you cast all those buffs like increases endurance by 30% or type resistance by 50% and all that kind of stuff, it's based on the raw stats, and she is improving the raw stats. So keep me safe, incredible for a tank. And then please, to the user's right, they gain singular focus, they gain mental focus, and they get spoiling, which improves their raw power and intellect. and it can be stacked up to 100 points. So if you have your damage dealer to her right, you can give that damage dealer an extra 100 points of power or an extra 100 points of intellect. And then characters that have spoiling, where does it say? Weapon user's buff effect increases for allies of spoiling. So the 50% damage buff can become 100% if they have spoiling. All allies still get 50 regardless. So she is amazing for defense if you need it. She is amazing for offense if you need it. And she can deploy a zone. And she can do status immunity. She can do cyclone immunity. She can put on pain, poison, ignores target resistance. For me, it's very, very hard to choose 3 skills. And T-Break is her only offensive skill possible. So during an AF burst, if you don't have T-Break equipped, there's no damage that she's doing during that. I just tend to spam please to get that stacking, to refresh all the spoiling and all that. So Myunfa Alter, amazing support character for Earth and Magic teams, and I have her in both, and I love her in both. So that is the first 6 of the non-Stellar Awakened characters that I feel are important for various reasons. The next 6. Radias AS. People that have been playing the game as long as I have knew when she was released that she would be the tank to have, and sure enough, she did not disappoint. She can cast Absorb Blood, apply pain on all enemies, ignores resistance, and restores her health. She can cast Overwhelm. It stacks, it reduces enemies' power over and over and over, and it gives a barrier to all party members for a one-time 70% damage reduction, which when she was released, this is years ago, that was amazing, and being able to reduce enemies' power was pretty amazing. Perhaps most amazing, as long as there was any zone out there, she gains a shield based on her max health, not like a percent of her max health, it was her max health. If her max health, I do have a... If her max health was like 14,000, not that it was way, way back in the day, but if her max health is at 14,000, then you cast a single Overwhelm in a zone, and she gains a 14,000 point shield. Basically, it effectively doubled her health while reducing the enemy's power. It does not reduce the enemy's intellect, so she wasn't quite as helpful against magic dealing bosses, but that Overwhelm was amazing. Prominence Purge inflicted rage for 5 turns, ignored target resistance, improved her physical resistance by 70%, and gave her status immunity. And then, perhaps the other most important thing about her, as long as there was a zone in play and you cast Prominence Purge, she gained a counterattack. Every time she got hit, she would heal the party members for 50% of their health and restore mana. So she would take the hits, she would counter, she would heal the team back, she would heal herself back, she would restore the party's MP, and she would be given status immunity for one time. So she was just an amazing tank back in the day. Irresistible Rage, great against physical bosses. She would improve her physical resistance, she would reduce physical damage, and she would have a shield based on her health. So those 2 alone were great. And then I guess I can show you in this. If that wasn't enough, she had one additional ability that doesn't show up on the list. It's her base skill. She has Chivalry. She has 3 uses of it per fight. There's no way that I know of to get more. And her Endurance and Spirit are improved while she has all 3 stacks. So each time you used a Chivalry, you actually would reduce her defenses a little tiny bit. But what it would do she would gain preemptive guard until the end of the turn when she used it. So let's find something. What's it say? Whatever. So when she uses Chivalry, you'll see the entire team shielded right there. And all the enemy's attacks would go to her, and she was guaranteed to survive. There was no way to defeat her. Kind of like an Alma AS type style, but more on demand, because you could choose when to use it. So if you knew the steps in a fight, and you knew that the boss was about to do a really, really powerful attack, you could go ahead and cast Chivalry that turn. It was preemptive, so it would go first. The boss would do that lethal attack. She would laugh at it. She'd probably counter it and heal the team and give them back some MP, and then you would go on and win the fight. So let's go ahead and finish up this one. So Radias AS. She was the tank for a very long time. Kind of like now, today's standards, Annabelle Stellar Awakened is the tank to get. Well, Radius for a long time was the tank to get. And she was just amazing, had a lot of useful skills, and she was also a fire user, which meant if you happened to have her paired with people like Aldo, Aisha, etc., you had yourself a fairly strong fire team very early on. Next, Sesta Normal Style. Sesta Normal Style was a game changer. When she was released, it was kind of a madhouse. I remember Reddit at the time, the did you get Sesta threads, and then everyone was like, oh my gosh, I went back and tried this with Sesta, and it was amazing. And of course the people that never did get Sesta were like, oh, I'm at such a disadvantage now. And sadly, they were right. Sesta Normal Style has, well, if you look at her skills, kind of sort of standard. I mean, good, especially at the time, but things like she would buff herself, she would crush her blow, reduce wind resistance, stuff like that. But when you start reading all these descriptions, you see under Twin Blade Wolf or Awakened Wind King stance, and Crusher Blow under Twin Blade Wolf, under Twin Blade Wolf, etc., under Twin Blade Wolf. And you'll notice that there's a huge difference. Like Starving Wolf, it's strength times 5, but if you use it in Twin Blade Wolf, it's only strength times 35, and Barrier Pierces. Like, the buffs under it were incredible. How it worked: if she was in, if she was in an Awakened Wind Zone, she would get a stack of Divine Wolf at the start of the turn, and her normal attack would change into that Twin Blade Wolf. So as long as she was in an Awakened Wind Zone, and that Awakened Wind Zone never went away, she could literally Twin Blade Wolf every single turn. And Twin Blade Wolf at the time, well, I mean, even by today's standards, is still very strong. So let's go to the Wind team. We are in an Awakened Zone. Her first skill is Twin Blade Wolf. We cast it. Depravity. Let's just get some normal attacks going. Here we go. 8 million, 9 million, 4 million, 680 million. Where in the world did that come from? And
let us rest for now.
I mean, today's standards, we have characters in the billions, and of course, her AS form is one of the best characters in the game currently, bar none. But Sesta, again, casual player. I like things nice and easy. I click one button and I win. That makes me happy. And so, as long as she's in an Awakened Wind Zone, she is doing barrier piercing damage every single turn and does not run out. It doesn't even take any MP. So she was a total game changer, because when she was released, we didn't have things like revive points and enemies with 100 billion health like we do now. The biggest issues we had with enemies was that they always had barriers. You had to chew through like 35 stacks of a barrier or 40 stacks of a barrier. So barrier piercers were very, very helpful. And most barrier piercers did okay damage. Like we had Alma, who could barrier pierce. We had Myunfa AS, who could barrier pierce. But you really had to like either build up or get a lot of rare items, rare Grasta, hard to get weapons, etc. to really make them strong. In Sesta's case, she could run around completely naked and still do massive amounts of damage. And yeah, I have some shared Grasta, but this is just to prove a point. Alright, nothing, Twin Blade Wolf, nothing, okay. So here is naked Sesta. There, completely unequipped, still did 60 million in damage, barrier piercing damage. Alright, we'll just finish up this fight now. Now, the back row characters are holding a few Grasta that are still boosting that up. But even without them, you know, she would still be doing like 10 million in damage, or 15, maybe 20 million in damage. So she was a total game changer when she was released. Everyone wanted to get her. I was fortunate. I had actually, that was kind of around the time that I had gotten Flammelapis AS, Flammelapis normal style, and Tsubame AS, and I was finally enjoying the game again. And that was just a few months before Sesta's banner arrived, and Sesta's banner appeared. I pulled on it. I don't know how many pulls I spent. I remember thinking at the time, everyone's talking about this person, I guess she must be good, I better pull for her. I didn't really know much about the game at that time. And when I got her, it really was like night and day. Yeah. I have so many silver tokens. It's not even funny. So let's go back to my list. So, Sesta, total game changer. If you look back at my earliest videos, she was probably in about half of them. Her barrier piercing's ability was incredible to have. It got me through a lot of tier 9, 10, 11 fights on the wiki super boss list. And particularly, once I got her, I did not have Melody AS. And I realized that the most important thing for Sesta was to find a way to keep that win zone going. And at the time, there was really only two characters that could, Melody AS or Suzette with her Bolt of Bahamut. And so you can bet I got Suzette Stellar Awakened as quick as possible. And you'll see the two of them wreaking havoc way back in my earliest videos. But Suzette's downside, I mean, she applied pain, and she gave me the win zone, and it was kind of on demand, but you had to build up that stellar burst gauge. And at the time, there weren't that many stellar characters, so it took a little while to get the gauge going. And then if you had a boss dispel the zone, then you had to wait for the gauge to fill up again. So when I was searching the wiki, I saw, hey, this Melody person can deploy a win zone pretty much whenever she wants. And I'm like, and she healed and everything. So I'm like, I definitely have to get her. She was one of the Melody was one of the few characters that if I ran to the Sensationalist in the Phantom Crystal dimension, I was picking her treatises way more than anything else. I ignored everything. I zeroed in on one character that I really wanted, and I did finally get enough treatises to side grade her. So, and the two of them, Sesta and Melody, allowed me to beat so much content. Soira helped a lot too, but we'll get to her next. First, though, is Shion Alter. He does not have a Stellar Awakening. His Shion Alter AS style does, but he himself does not. Again, if you look at his skills, they're all pretty straightforward. He can deploy a magic zone, which was nice. He could create a break, which was pretty cool. And he had Illusion Black Dragon, which improved damage against weak points. And if he cast it while a zone was deployed, everyone would get mental focus. So nice. Everything's going good. He had Suzaku Encirclement, which does a lot of damage if the enemy was weak to him. So you're thinking, okay, he seems pretty straightforward. Let's go ahead and swap those two while I'm thinking about it. I haven't used him in a while now. His claim to fame is his first skill,
Don't back down.
Paper Tiger. Paper Tiger, the description is very, very straightforward. Applies the following effects to all enemies. Invert. Basically, if something resisted a type attack, like if it resists fire and you cast Paper Tiger, it becomes weak to fire. And if these two resist fire and these two resist water, then casting Paper Tiger, they would all become weak. Well, these two would become weak to fire and these two would become weak to water. So he was able to manipulate. All we got, that, and that, sure. So by casting Paper Tiger, there it goes. You see like a little shield with a little swap symbol there. Right there. Resistance becomes weak points become resistances. So, and he could turn the tide of a boss fight very easy. If you had a boss that resisted every single element, he would cast Paper Tiger, and for the entire rest of the fight, it would be weak to every single element. Which was really awesome if you paired him with like Alma, for example, because she would just brain record in, zero in on the weak point, and then all of her attacks would be that weak point for the rest of the fight. So I nearly threw Alma normal style into this list as well. Just a little side note there. So his Paper Tiger, which can only be used once per fight, is why I threw him in. So let's go ahead and finish this up. Aside from that, Shion Alter was an okay character. He was really good with fire teams and magic teams, which is one reason why I had him paired with Alma. Alma was a magic user, or she did magic damage, even though it was based on her power. And since Alma could tap into weaknesses with brain record, and he could manipulate weaknesses, they were a good pair for each other. And then he could set a magic zone, which would make Alma's attacks even more powerful as well. My very first super boss team was actually him, Alma, and Radias together. And if you look way, way back on my YouTube channel at some of the earliest super boss teams, you will see that group, and they had a lot of success because Alma could also barrier pierce. I guess we need to go restore some health and mana. I always call it mana. It just says MP. I'm sure it's magic points. I don't think they've ever used the word mana once in this game, but I guess I've been playing way too many role-playing games. I always call it mana. In fact, oops, not map. I don't care about the map. Since I was just talking about Alma. I was trying to keep it to 12 characters, but you know what? We're just going to toss in Best Girl Alma as well. So she's on my Crystal team. Alma Normal Style. Alma Normal Style. She had Ether Alchema. It was a magic attack only on one single character, but it barrier pierced. And if she was in trance, it barrier pierced for a tremendous amount of damage. And then she also has Brain Record, where she scopes a single enemy. If the enemy was weak to fire, for example, then all of her attacks would suddenly become fire attacks. So as you can see, Shion Alter was able to manipulate weaknesses, and then she would take advantage of them and create, and basically all of her skills would no longer be crystal, they would be fire or shade or whatever. And of course they were barrier piercing. So, and then she also had Elixir Ray, which allows her to use Lunatic again and again and again and again. So she was one of the rare characters that could have infinite Lunatics if you wanted. And then she had a few other perks like reducing enemies' power and stuff like that. So Alma Normal Style was a character that I used a very long time. It was when I had her, Radias, and Shion Alter that I finally found my first true super boss team, one that was able to hit the damage cap and one that was able to pierce barriers and obliterate things. And that was actually one of the reasons I started my YouTube channel. When I finally, I don't know what it was, it just clicked in my brain like, oh, that's how you choose which characters can be paired with which other characters. And so I shared that with people, and I haven't looked at the video in probably years now, but that kind of just led to the development of my channel as you see it today. So Alma, definitely another very valid non-Stellar Awakened character. Of course, her Stellar Awakened form is also, like Sesta, one of the best characters in the game right now. Alright, going back to my list. Soira. A little sad, we're almost at the end of the list. Alright, Soira has a few skills that are very helpful, and if nothing else, her 4-star and her, I think she has a 3-star? Yeah, her 3 and 4 stars always seem to appear in summoning. So for me, at least, she was a very easy character to get light points for, because I always seemed to get her. So that came in handy when her AS form came out. I had very easily the ability to equip 2 badges and 4 Grasta. So anyway, what makes Soira so amazing? Well, she's a tank. She has a preemptive attack that inflicts rage, so right off the bat she will redirect enemies towards herself. It reduced power and intellect at the same time and stacks. So she would preemptively say, hey, I exist, you all need to attack me, and oh, by the way, your attacks aren't quite as strong as they were. If she was in a zone, the party would also crit, but usually you used weapons that had 100% crit anyway, so that part wasn't as important. So she redirected immediately characters to herself, and she improved her type and physical resistance, and if she was in a zone, she would gain a shield based on her max health. So that meant if she had, for example, 9,000 health, she would gain a shield for 9,000 health. So she was very similar to Radius, except that she also reduced intellect and improved type resistance. So she was good against both physical and magic attacks. And then she had a few other things like Elemental Guard, improves party resistance, stuff like that. Binding Armor, she could improve her physical resistance, so if you were going into a fight against a physical user, you'd probably have Binding Armor equipped. If you went into a fight with a magic user, you'd probably equip Elemental Guard. So she was a little bit customizable as well. But she has Critical Guard, which made her amazing. She went from good to, oh my gosh, she can survive anything. Critical Guard is, I still see questions about a lot on Reddit and other sites. Not all tanks have Critical Guard. Radias AS does not, for example. Annabelle, her current Stellar Awakening, she has a skill that gives her temporary critical guard, but she doesn't have it permanently. Soira had it permanently. And what critical guard does, in very simple terms, if your critical rate is 100%, critical guard will trigger 100% of the time, aka it will always be up. If you have a critical rate of, say, 50%, here it's over 100%, if your physical critical rate is like 50%, then critical guard triggers half the time. If your critical rate is 25%, then you trigger critical guard only a quarter of the time. So step one, for people with critical guard, you always want their physical critical rate at 100% or higher. Now, a lot of characters, buffs can do that, and so you don't have to use weapons that have 100% critical rating, but if buffs get dispelled or used up or run out, I usually just like to equip them just to be on the safe side. So we know that critical guard will trigger all the time. What is it? Critical guard takes your luck, it divides it by 500. So 305 divided by 500, I have a calculator open right now, is 0.61. Then you multiply that number by 0.75. So I have 0.4575. That means 100% of the time, all damage to Soira gets reduced by basically 46%. It caps out when your luck hits 500. So 500 divided by 500 is 1. 1 times 0.75 is 0.75. If you can get your luck to 500, all damage to Soira all of the time will be reduced by 75%. And that is before it starts factoring in things like type resistance, physical resistance. So remember that she's also weakening both magic and, almost said power attacks, physical attacks. So she weakens the boss that she's fighting. If her luck is really high, and if she has 100% critical rating, the boss is constantly doing less damage to her. And then you throw in things like Foi Sincere, where she has physical and type resistance, a shield, then she's nearly unkillable. So when she was released, being a wind user, she was amazing to pair with people like Sesta or Melody or Suzette. And if that wasn't enough, her base skill is something called Noblesse Oblige. And you could use it over and over and over again. It never runs out. What it does, until the end of the turn, attacks that would hit the entire team only go to her, but she takes double damage. Well, if her luck is high, if her critical rate's 100%, and if she has her shield, if she has her resistances, it doesn't really matter if something that, was going to hit everyone for, say, 5,000. So 5,000, 10,000, 15, 20,000 in damage would be going to her. Well, if she's maxed out her critical guard, 75% of that 15,000 would go away. So she would only take 5,000 in damage. And then if you factor in resistances, she might take less than 5,000. And if she happens to have her HP shield up, then her hit point shield, like right now, she has 9,000. If she had a 9,000 hit point shield and she only took like 5,000 in damage, her shield would be hurt. She would not be. And she would still be at full health after taking what would have done 20,000 in damage to the whole party. It's really hard to kind of talk all that out without you all being able to see it. I really wish they would make a bag baddie that actually fought back. I think that would be amazing for tank testing, personally. But she could literally cast Noblesse Oblige every single turn. Like, she could work... In fact, let's just do it really quick. We're going to stack some Floor Breezes on the enemy. Working up Foi Sincere right there. So just consider this for a second. These enemies, their power and intellect are decreased right now, 2 stacks worth. Her physical and type resistance are beefed up tremendously. She has critical guard, so for the next 3 turns or so, I get to sit there and spam Noblesse Oblige over and over and over again. All the enemies would attack her with their AE attacks, and she would just laugh it off, because it'd be so weak, she wouldn't, chances are, her hit points wouldn't even take any damage. So Radias and Soira were like the top tanks for a long time for those skills. Radius for basically complete immunity 3 times, and Soira for her critical guard and Noblesse Oblige redirection of damage. And again, you will see that if you look back in my earliest videos, my earliest win teams always had Soira as the tank, and she was finally replaced by Shion Alter, who basically was a more offensive version of Soira. But that is Soira, another non-Stellar Awakened character that I feel is very powerful and still could be used today. If you are lacking a wind tank and you're sitting around on a Soira, feel free to go ahead and side grade her if you have the memoirs, and you will gain yourself a very decent wind tank. So not quite the current endgame like meta tanks like Shion or Shion Alter, oh, Shion AS, Shion Alter, but still a very good one. All right, we're starting to wrap up here. Velette normal style is an amazing character to have. She comes first of all with Guns. Do I even have any sidekicks equipped? Tetra and Kumaru. All right. Guns has the ability to redeploy an awakened Thunder Zone over and over and over again, as many times as you need it. So he was very helpful for Thunder teams for that. And then, if you blew an AF gauge, or if an enemy drained your AF gauge, the entire party's stats would increase by 20. Their power, their intellect, their speed, their luck if they were critical guard. So, first of all, just by having Velette, you're going to gain Guns. If you have her, I think 5-starred. But she herself is no slacker either. Thunder teams thrive on multiple hits. So anything that attacks 4 times or 5 times is good to keep the AF burst going. She has the ability to apply pain and poison. She has the ability to improve parties' power, intellect, speed, thunder attacks, max MP, and everything is basically 100% and 50%. 50% for the... I guess so. Never really looked before. Max MP 50% would be incredible for things like mental focus, which she happens to apply all at the same time with Exousia. So she has a powerful, powerful buff right there. So she applies pain. She buffs the whole team. She can give them a regen. She can give them an MP regen. She can awaken the zone if necessary. She can hit things 5 times, improve critical damage, magic critical damage for all allies, and then multi-upgrade. If you have a character that has a skill that hits 5 times, each hit gets stronger and stronger and stronger, all the way till you're doing triple damage if you're able to hit all 5 times. I think it's like 0.5, 1, 1.5, 2, 2. I guess it'd be 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, and 3. So even if you have something that hits 4 times, you're still doing 2.5 times more damage with multi-upgrade. And that is for all allies. So if you have other characters that hit like 3, 4, 5 times, they're all making use of this. And then she has Amped, where if you are in a thunder zone, it can get stronger and stronger. It's a zone ability. So she has a bunch of things that can help. I don't think I even mentioned her unique skills, the Astrophy series, but it hits 4 times, improves critical rates, reduces thunder resistance, and stacks. So if you want to build a thunder team, she, and technically her AS style, one of those Velettes is pretty much required for a really good thunder team. But I find that her normal style more than, more than meets the requirements. No, I almost said more than meets the eye because I grew up with Transformers. So, bottom line, her normal style, amazing. If you're building thunder teams, you want her. If you like crazy archaeologists, you might want her as well. And then, finally, Yipha. Her another style form, her Juno form. There's no Stellar Awakening. None of her styles actually have Stellar Awakening. She is really helpful in a lot of ways. She has Benacht Bua, which is a preemptive boost to strength, damage, power, and intellect. And we'll get to this Promised Blessing in a minute. And I'm not quite sure if it's Dokais, something. But it improves physical and type resistance to reserves as well, status immunity, cyclone immunity. And then again, we'll get to this Promised Blessing in a minute. Early on with wind teams, she was a great asset because she would buff up the team with Benacht Bua. She would help them survive with Athdalkis, throw her in with Soira, for example. And Soira was gaining extra physical and type resistance from an outside source, and Soira was getting status immunity and knockback immunity. But what, actually, is it mentioned in her abilities? Faith. Okay. It doesn't quite say what Promised Blessing does it? Alright, guess we'll have to get into a fight again. We need to move her into the front line. We'll get rid of one. Oh, look, I almost have a wind team. Oh, you know what? Let's grab Melody, just for some old school vibes there. This actually was one of my Super Boss win teams for months, if not a year. Kind of funny now that I'm thinking about it. But I guess it makes sense. The characters that I would say are really awesome to have are characters that I have a history with. So, alright, well, let's do this. Alright, so Yipha has this thing called Faith. And you click it, and you can choose which character to give Faith to. So, we'll give it to Sesta. Let's just have the others kind of do whatever. Alright, there's Faith. She kneeled and prayed. You saw the heavenly light focus on Sesta. And there's a little orange circle on Sesta now. And there goes Melody doing her awakened wind zone thing. Alright, orange circle thing. This is Faith. Adds half of Yipha's spirit to all stats except health and MP. And it's limited to 600. So that means you can give up to 300 points of power, intellect, speed, endurance, luck, etc. to a character simply by casting Faith on them. And then a lot of her other skills. For example, Benacht Bua, it says allies with Promised Blessing, aka Sesta in this case. The buff that would be like 50% strength, 50% power, etc., is doubled. Her type attack is improved by 100%, so if I cast Benacht Bua, herself, Melody, and Soira would all get 50% buffs, but Sesta would get a 100%. buff. If I cast Athdalicus, it says allies with promised blessing. They gain a max HP shield. So if I am fighting something that's doing a lot of damage, and I cast Athdalicus, then Sesta would gain a shield, in addition to the extra type and physical resistance. So if I cast Benacht Biwa, and she does her Twin Blade Wolf right now, and the other two just kind of do whatever, it's preemptive.
Move! Listen. These are the cries of the voiceless.
Sesta does a massive amount of damage. Remember that Sesta is unequipped right now, and earlier in the video when she was unequipped she did about 30 million per hit. Well, right now, just thanks to the promised blessing, she did 60 million per hit. You'll notice that the team's MP is staying high thanks to Melody. So now let's go ahead and finish up here. Whatever, who cares? So Yipha's promised blessing, her faith, takes half of her spirit. So right now it's 292. If we divide that in half, we get 146. So she just added 146 points of power to Sesta. So if you walk in with a geared Sesta, and you improve her power basically 150 points, and suddenly her attack power is in the 700s. And of course, if you get Yipha gear that improves spirit, things like spirit badges, things like that, you know, you can skyrocket her spirit. If you have a character that can buff spirit and improve her spirit, and then she casts faith, it's even more. So now we have a geared Sesta. Faith, one Sesta. And who cares? Who cares? Not Twin Blade.
Move! Blessings upon you!
I also realized Gunts is part of the party. Hey Gunts, what's up? Alright, she casts Benacht. She's going to tremendously buff Sesta, who will Twin Blade. And who cares whatever, who cares whatever. There's the buff. Here goes Sesta.
These are the cries of the voiceless.
Look at that health. Look at that. 1 billion per Twin Blade, so 2 billion in damage there at the end. So let's reorganize a little bit. Radius. Let's see, we had name. Shion Alter. There we go. So anyway, you can see that Yipha herself is not like a powerful, huge damage dealer, but through her buffs, she can make someone else really, really, really powerful. Which, back when these characters were first being released, you know, I realized by today's standards, 2 billion at the end of a hit is like, it is 2 billion barrier piercing damage, so keep that in mind. But, you know, back like 2 years ago, that was amazing damage. This group was left alone. Alright, so the question that I received from Nicholas, sorry if you don't go by Nick, he wanted to see a list and review of my favorite non-Stellar Awakened characters. Aisha, incredibly useful early on in the game. Elseal creates her own weaknesses that are permanent and on demand. Flammelapis, great early character to have for trash clearing and boss killing. Iphi, great even now, for blood contracts and ability to manipulate death, basically. Melody, I still feel, is important even in current 2025 game because of her ease for deploying wind zones, healing, MP regen, pain, barriers. You ask, she has it. Buffs, debuffs, etc. Myunfa, being able to reduce damage down to 0 is incredible, and if you can knock the boss's damage output down below 1500, she'll reduce it even further. Radius, one of the best tanks in the game, hands down. Good timing of chivalry in particular would win or lose fights. Sesta normal style, just beyond mind-blowing damage output when she was released. The fact that it was barrier piercing, and as long as she could keep up awakened wind zones, she could do it infinitely. It really did make her a game changer. Shion had the ability to manipulate weaknesses, which other characters could take advantage of. Soira, one of the earliest critical guard tanks that if you knew what critical guard was, you could basically make her unkillable. Velette, who, if you have a Thunder team, you have to have Velette in there, pretty much no questions asked. And then Yipha, who could completely double, triple output damage, or if you had a critical guard tank that needed luck, Yipha casts Faith on the critical guard tank, that critical guard tank will never die. They will instantly hit the 500 luck cap if you gear them correctly and Yipha correctly. And since we included her, whoops, not stellar, this is nonsense. Alma normal style has the ability to queue into weaknesses, transform her barrier piercing attacks into whatever element the weakness is, and just a very powerful character, especially paired with Shion Alter. So that is 13 characters now, first 6, second 6, that I feel still have a tremendous amount of relevant use for the most part. I don't really use Flammelapis or really Aisha anymore, but just because I have their upgrades. Shion has kind of fallen out of use for me as of this time, but he was amazing back in the day. And Alma, of course, I use her normal style. And then, honorable mention, best girl Nona. I'm married to a redhead. She's cute. I like her. I like her personality, storyline, everything. So I don't really use her that much as far as characters go, but the question was a list and review of my favorite non-SA characters. And Nona is definitely one of my favorites. Just personality and, waifu purposes, I guess. So that is my collection. That's 14 characters. I've probably rambled long enough. But yeah, if this helps any of you all, great. I'm always happy to talk about those characters. And, I can always use them in fights. Like if you're like, hey, Crono, I'm trying this one fight, and I have Soira and Sesta and Yipha. How do I defeat this boss? And while they may or may not be able to handle some of the most recent stuff, like some of the weapon tempering bosses that have 80 billion in health, and you have to beat them in like 10 turns or less for pledges, I'm not so sure they can pull that type of stuff off. But if you're just trying to beat some run-of-the-mill boss, and you're like, hey, I remember you had Flammelapis and Elseal. They're both water users. Can I somehow, get them together and do something? I can do my best to try and answer questions. So I hope this helps you all. And Nicholas, thank you so much for the suggestion. And I hope this video kind of answers your question if you're watching it. So, Casual Crono, signing out.